Well, good morning. It is a privilege to be here this morning to honor our veterans, a few of our veterans that have served throughout the years. My name is Colleen Munn, and I will be the MC for this morning. I am also the chair of this organization, PA Stitchers of Valor, which is a local chapter of the National Quilts of Valor Foundation. But before we get started, I'd like to have you stand as we do the Pledge of Allegiance and sing our national anthem. I'm going to ask Commander Ken Miller from the VFW to come up front and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. And then I'm going to have Kristen Powell and her father, Scott, come and sing the national anthem for us.
Facing the flag, attention. I pledge allegiance to the flag, United States of America, to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Hold our arm.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we held at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you. You may be seated. Quilts of Valor was started in 2003 by a grassroots quilter, Catherine Roberts. She had the idea of comforting quilters or comforting veterans with quilts when her son was deployed to Iraq. Since then, more than 187,000 quilts of valor have been made and presented to veterans in the United States, Germany, Afghanistan, and Iraq. Our mission is to honor our service members and veterans who have been touched by war with a quilt of valor. Thousands of quilters all over the U.S. work daily to create quilts to cover our veterans from all conflicts, including World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan. PA Stitchers of Valor, the local chapter, was started last year, March 2017. We have around 18 to 20 active members. Since our start, we have made and presented over 50 quilts of valor within our community, with requests coming in daily. The closest, can you hear me?
No.
You're right behind me.
I know. Is your switch on? Okay.
The closest?
Hudson.
Oh, there we go.
Hello? There you go.
Hey.
The closest other Quilts of Valor groups are in Erie, Pittsburgh, and State College. So there's a big hole in our area that we're trying to fill. Quilts of Valor are awarded. They are not just handed out. These Quilts of Valor are unequivocally say thank you for your service, sacrifice, and valor in serving our great country. At this time, I'd like to recognize all veterans that are present with us today. So if you're a veteran, would you please stand? Thank you. Thank you for your service. A quilt of valor is not a charity quilt or just a blanket. It consists of 3 layers, and I'm going to have Kathy help me with this. The top layer, as you can see, has many colors, shapes, and fabrics, and it represents the communities and the individuals who contributed to it. The batting, the filling, is the center of the quilt's warmth. It represents our hope that this quilt will bring warmth, comfort, peace, and healing to the individual who receives it. The backing is the strength that supports the other layers. It represents the strength of the recipient, the support of his family and friends, our communities, and our nation. Each stitch that holds the layers together represents the love and gratitude and sometimes the tears of the maker. PA Stitchers of Valor, PA Stitchers of Valor meets on a monthly basis to sew, and as we are sewing, we share our family members, friends, and neighbors that we have are serving. We share their stories and what we've heard lately from them if they're still serving. That is usually when the tears come, or when you're trying to speak. I'm going to ask all the quilters that are here today to take your places behind your quilt.
Sorry.
Just don't knock the quilts off. You can stand, that's fine. For those of you who have never served, seen combat, or been in a war zone, such experiences are beyond our capacity to comprehend. But we believe that a quilt that is awarded to you today has the ability to offer comfort, healing, and warmth. We hope that when you experience dark times or hear the experience dark times or need the warmth of a grateful hug, you can wrap your quilt around you so that it will provide you the comfort which has been shown into each inch and feel the expression of gratitude from those who have worked to create it. Each Quilt of Valor is presented with a hug, not given like a book or a magazine. On one side of the quilt is a quilter, on the other side is a family member or friend, so that you will never forget you have the support of your family, friends, and community. Ladies, will you please wait? Don't. Okay. At this time, I'm going to have John Amato come up and read off the names, and as he does so, will you please, each veteran, come forward and bring your spouse or family member if you have somebody with you. And we'll go through the names here.
Start at one end.
And you're going to start at that end. So the first quilt's going to be with Joy down there on the far end, and we'll go from there.
Good morning. Good morning. Our first recipient is Specialist 4th Class Monty Hudson. Monty Hudson served in the United States Army from November 1966 to October 1968, and he is a veteran of the Vietnam War. His job in Vietnam was driving fuel trucks to keep the guys in the front lines supplied. His awards include the Army Marksmanship Badge, National Defense Medal, Vietnam Campaign Medal, Vietnam Service Medal. Specialist 4th Class Monty Hudson. Our second recipient is Corporal Curtis P. Gilson, Sr. Corporal Gilson served in the United States Marine Corps from November 1989 to August 1993. After boot camp, he went into the Marine Corps Training School for Infantry with MOS 0351. He served in security forces in Virginia, served 2 years in Iceland with the 3rd Platoon, 2nd Marine Division, Lima Company, Weapons Platoon, went to Bridgeport Mountain Warfare Training, and deployed to Japan and Korea. Corporal Curtis P. Gilson, Sr. Our next recipient is Technical Sergeant David Brooks. Sergeant Brooks served in the United States Air Force in the PA Air National Guard from 1966 to 2004. He enlisted in the Air Force and was a jet engine mechanic. He then went to UH-1 Repair and Crew Chief School, PA Army National Guard, and from 1980 to 1987, Technical Sergeant Brooks was the unit training NCO. In 1987 to 2004, Mr. Brooks was a combat aircrew member and was an operations electronic engineer for an EC C-130 with the 193rd Special Operations Wing in Middletown, PA, Harrisburg. He was active duty during the Vietnam era, but not served there. He did combat flights in Desert Storm, Kosovo, and Bosnia. He was getting ready to deploy in Afghanistan during freedom when medical issues kept him from forward deploying and ended his military career. Technical Sergeant David Brooks. Technical Sergeant Phillip E. Allan. And his dog Roscoe. Roscoe. I'm sorry. Roscoe. Technical Sergeant Allan served combined service for 13 years as an Army airborne medic with the 82nd Airborne Division and 10 years as an electrician with the Air Force. He did 3 tours in the desert, Desert Storm, Operation Iraqi Freedom, Operation Enduring Freedom. During that time, he received 43 medals. He graduated from 2 colleges, Penn State, IUP, and the Community College of the Air Force. And his service dog's name is Roscoe. Sergeant First Class Darren Hall, retired. Sergeant Hall served in the United States Army. He was a Special Operations Senior Medical Sergeant. His years of service were from 1984 to 2009. He was stationed at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. During that time, he served with the 82nd Airborne Division, 18th Airborne Corps, and the Special Operations Command. Sergeant Hall deployed to Central America, Afghanistan, and Iraq. Just a few of his awards include the Parachutist Badge, the Combat Medic Badge, 2 Bronze Stars, Army Commendation Medal with Valor, V for Valor, Air Force Achievement Medal, Afghan Campaign Medal, Iraq Campaign Medal, and Global War on Terrorism Expeditionary Medal. Sergeant First Class Darren Hall. Our next recipient is Petty Officer Second Class David K. Miller, 92 years old and our World War II vet. Petty Officer Miller joined the Navy on Christmas of 1943, his senior year in high school, where he went to boot camp in the Great Lakes and received training as a basic engineer. Petty Officer Miller went to Richmond, Virginia for diesel school, then to Little Creek, Virginia for amphibian training. He was then sent to Charleston, South Carolina to pick up a ship, the LSM-178, on which he served as a motor machinist for 2.5 years in the Pacific. And for those of you that don't know, LSM is a loading ship mediums, and they were built for the United States Navy during World War II, and they delivered supplies to the beaches for those, usually Marines, that were hitting the beaches. The LSM-178 dropped supplies on every island in the Pacific except Australia and Japan. Petty Officer Miller was discharged on May 10, 1946. On May 11, 1946, he enlisted in the Navy Reserve and stayed in that capacity until 1954. In 2002, Mr. Miller received his high school diploma after 61 years.
The only reason I got it, there was no test.
Petty Officer Miller serves as president of the National LSM organization and attends yearly meetings. This organization started with about 3,000 members and now has about 600 remaining. Petty Officer Second Class David K. Miller. Our next recipient is Petty Officer Third Class Robert M. Stevens. Petty Officer Stevens served in the United States Navy, and he served during the Vietnam War. He joined the Navy in November 1965, went to boot camp in San Diego, and further training at Chase Field, Belleville, Texas, with his training squadron. He was sent to temporary duty assignment at Lakehurst, New Jersey. Then he received training for refueling of aircraft pump station. He was assigned to an East Coast carrier, but needed the carrier in the West Pacific to Yankee Station, so he traveled a long way around the Horn as the ship could not go through the Panama Canal. That ship that he was assigned to was the USS Forrestal, which is interesting because our next recipient, Boilerman Second Class John Cox, also served on that ship. The Forrestal was the site of the worst naval disaster in history. An electronical anomaly had caused the discharge of a Zuni rocket on the flight deck, triggering a chain reaction of explosions. 134 sailors were killed, 161 were injured. Petty Officer Stevens was one of those injured. After several different ship hospital transfers to get to the United States, Mr. Stevens spent his last year's service in the Philadelphia Naval Hospital recovering. Petty Officer Third Class Robert M. Stevens. Our next recipient, Boilerman, 2nd Class, John Cox. Petty Officer Cox served in the United States Navy from April 1966 to April 1970 during the Vietnam War. He was a boiler tender on the USS Forrestal, which was a United States aircraft carrier. In June 1967, the Forrestal departed Norfolk for duty in the waters off Vietnam. In the Gulf of Tonkin, on 29 July, Forrestal had been launching aircraft from her flight deck for 4 days. The planes of attack carrier Wing 17 flew about 150 mission targets in North Vietnam from the ship. On 29 July 1967, during preparation for another strike, a Zuni rocket installed on an F-4 Phantom misfire, impacting an armed A-4 Skyhawk parked on the port side. The rocket's impact dislodged and ruptured the Skyhawk's 400-gallon external fuel tank. Fuel from the leaking tank caught fire, creating a serious conflagration that burned for hours, killing 134, injuring 161, destroying 21 aircraft, and costing the Navy $72 million. On the flight deck that day was Lieutenant Commander John McCain as well. Petty Officer, 2nd Class, John Cox. Our next recipient is Airman Thurn Vlasnik. Mr. Vlasnik graduated from Doutt, Wisconsin High School in May 1960. In September of 1960, he went into the United States Air Force. His basic training was at Lackland Air Force Base in Texas. From there, he was sent to Westmerst Air Base in Oscoda, Michigan, where he worked on B-52s and KC-135 planes. He was sent to Spain for 6 weeks during his 4 years in the Air Force. He was honorably discharged in September 1964. Airman Vlasnik. Next recipient, Private First Class Clinton James Henry. Is he here? Okay.
He's coming.
Okay. That's okay. Private First Class Henry was drafted into the United States Army at the age of 22 in November 1956. He went to boot camp at Fort Benning, Georgia, and was stationed in Long Beach, Long Island, New York, which was a guided missile base. His jobs included motor pool driver. He drove a deuce and a half in parades to show off the Army's missiles, chauffeuring captains and lieutenants. He was honorably discharged in December of 1958. Private First Class Clinton James Henry. Our last recipient is Petty Officer David Barry Doutt. Machinist mate, 3rd class.
Yeah. That needs forward.
Petty Officer Doutt served in the United States Navy. His years of service were May 28, 1963 to August 5, 1966. He was assigned to the USS Barry DD 933. He sailed nearly 50,000 miles around the world, traveling through the Panama Canal, Indian Ocean, Red Sea, Suez Canal, South China Sea, and the Mediterranean Sea. He participated in Operation Double Eagle, and he fired 70 rounds in combat in support of the Marines ashore in the South Vietnam coast and up the Saigon River. He passed through the Strait of Gibraltar on October 5, 1964. He crossed the Arctic Circle in September 1964. He crossed the equator in February 1966. His awards include the National Defense Medal and the Vietnam Service Medal. Petty Officer David Barry Doutt.
Okay, ladies. Okay, ladies. If you want to get your family member to help you, will you please present your quilts? These are wrapped around the veterans. Family member on one side, veteran, and the quilter on the other side to represent the family, friends, and community. With each quilt, the veterans will receive a certificate. The certificate says, "A Quilts of Valor Foundation wishes to recognize you for your service to our nation. We consider it a privilege to honor you. Though we may never know the extent of your sacrifice and service to protect and defend the United States of America, as an expression of our gratitude, we award you this Quilt of Valor." There's also a pillowcase or a presentation case at that time. As of today, the story behind this quilt is yours. There's stories behind each one of these quilts from the makers, but today it's yours, from this day forward. We hope you will keep this quilt with you as a tangible reminder that there are thousands of men and women across the country who are forever in your debt. Again, as it has been an honor to be here today to present these Quilts of Valor. Thank you, gentlemen, for your service, and it was an honor to be here today to present to you.